Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the meeting of the Scrutiny Committee of the 18th of December, 2025, and I'll start off with the agenda. I think straight onto the agenda. I think. So any apologies for absence?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Peter Slack and Councillor Jeff Bond.
Okay, thank you. I understand Peter's had a fall and is quite badly hurt. He's got broken ribs and a lot of bruising. So there are no members of the public, so we move on to the third item, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. So would anybody like to comment on the previous meeting minutes, or would anybody like to move them? All right. Okay. So we've got a mover and seconder. All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? Two abstentions. Okay, thank you. Interests. Does anybody have a disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest that they wish to declare at this stage? No, okay. Right, so we move to the substantive part of the meeting, and the first item there is the scrutiny work plan for 25-26, the update. Right, where are we? Item 6. So this is really an update on the work that we have done so far, and includes the review of the consultation engagement process, and
Chair, if it helps, I've pulled together information based on the work programme of that the committee has previously agreed. The first item was the review of the consultation and engagement process, and that is the subject for a separate item on this agenda, because the working group has now completed that review. I've provided under B some information that I've had feedback from members who are involved in the relationship between the council and MCA. So I've just provided an update there just to prove that it is work in progress, and some we're moving forward on that. Just a reminder there under C that the review of the experience of flooding, we're holding that in abeyance until we've ticked off some of the other higher priority items on the list, and we will start looking at that in the new year. And then under D, just an update I've received from officers on the nature delivery plan. I'm just proposing there that because we have a new director who's starting early in the new year, who will be responsible for that area of activity in the council, and also that they're recruiting to vacant posts, we'll look at that in more detail in the new year as well. But other than that, there's nothing else to report, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any comments on this paper? No? Yes, Andy.
Just on the nature of delivery plan, I think it's right to wait until the new director's in post, but I don't think we've had a climate and nature group meeting for at least 6 months now, and I think we do need to get a focus on that as soon as possible. Probably not for this meeting, but just a general thing for the council.
Okay. Is there anything we need to do in this meeting associated with that?
Since we're reviewing it, we probably need to make sure the meeting happens fairly soon.
Other comments on this report? Would anybody like to move that we note this update to the work programme? Okay, so we've got Roger and Peter Dobbs as mover and seconder. All those in favour? Any against? I think that's unanimous. So we move on to item 6, which is the forward plan of decisions. So this is the report that will, these are the decisions that Council will make for the period up until May 2026. Do you want to introduce this, Jason?
I won't spend too long on it, but just because this is the first time that we've formally brought the forward plan to Scrutiny Committee, I did a little bit of a detailed report beforehand just to give some background to pre-decision scrutiny and some of the benefits arising from it. So I'm not going to go through those. I'll assume they've been read. So the main item on there is the appendices, which is the Council's latest forward plan of decisions that are due to be made within the next 6 months. They're here before the committee to have a look at what's coming up, and if there are any items on that list that the committee would like to be the subject of pre-scrutiny, then this is your opportunity to raise them, and we can make arrangements for that pre-scrutiny to happen at a future meeting of the committee.
Thank you. Anybody like to make any suggestions in this area? Peter?
Not so much a suggestion, but I would welcome a little bit of expanding on this idea of pre-decision scrutiny, which comes as an interesting concept to me. I mean, I did a quick search for the term. It seemed more associated with cabinet-based councils, to be honest, as far as I can tell. But since the decisions that we're talking about in the forward plan of decisions are being made by committees, in a sense, and a committee that doesn't meet that often, I'm not quite sure how we would operate effectively within that structure. So perhaps you could tease out a little bit of how you saw it working. That would be helpful.
Okay, yes, I had some thoughts on that. I mean, essentially, scrutiny is about enabling people who aren't involved in decision making to have some say in the decision making process, and understanding, and a sense check on the process in terms of pre-decision scrutiny, a sense check on the process being used and the likely outcome of that process in terms of reports, before it gets to a point where the report is being written. So that puts some indication on the timescales and the direction that we would probably take in scrutinising the work being done. And that, as Jason has pointed out, it's really around things like the key pieces of evidence, emerging priorities, financial implications, and stakeholder engagement. And there may be changing priorities that we would really need. That may be an area that we would like to put some effort into. So there are issues about timescales that arise, because as Jason also points out, that if we scrutinise just before a paper is published, then there's no possibility of changing the direction that paper is taking, or any of our input really to be taken into consideration. And on the MCA Scrutiny Committee, we've had that problem. So we've been getting papers just before they go to the board, and it's too early to be able to make any adjustments to them. So they have to be the adjustments are addendums to the report rather than anything else, which is then taken into consideration in by the MCA board. And we could do that. We could have addendums to reports that go to council or to one of the committees with our suggested changes. But whether we want to do that or we want to be a little bit early on in the process, my own belief is that we should be looking a lot earlier on in the process, so that we can influence, or perhaps indicate where we think the priorities of the council might lie. And one of the advantages of doing this is it enables. I mean, we have a group now, which is a large group, which is actually the lead group, and then the opposition is relatively small in comparison with that group, and this would enable decision making to be opened up to or direction in decision making to be opened up to the opposition as well as to the lead group, and I think that would find there would be some benefit in enabling that in terms of reducing the amount of discussion in council meetings and committee meetings, and having it more directed towards the outcomes that we all want to achieve. So and then looking at what we sorry, Andy, yes.
Thanks, Chair. I recognise what you're saying about earlier scrutiny and broaden it out, and I think that's a really good thing if we can deliver it. One of the things that's really struck me since I arrived at the council, and it's only been 2 years now, is a lot of the policies that come in front of us, normally from an industrial or an industry background, I would have expected to see terms of reference written really early on that said this is what this report's going to look like, and that would get signed off by not necessarily the whole council, but by a group of people. And one way of doing what you want to do, or what I think you're trying to say, would be to have those terms of reference before anyone put pen to paper in the output that said this is what the report's going to look like. And obviously we can't predetermine what the report's going to look like, but we do need to say this is the scope we want it to be, the avenue of the scope we want it to be in, and then people can look at that up front and say, yeah, that's what we want, or actually we'd like it to be a bit wider, or we'd like it to be a bit narrower.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Peter, and then Laura.
Thanks. I mean, it's now down to specifics. If Jason, again, if you could expand a little bit about what is being referred to in 2.7 in 6 months to agree a new strategy. And bear in mind that, of course, the forward plan actually doesn't quite make 6 months, does it?
Well, to answer your last point first, it is meant to cover 6 months, and I did mention to the chair earlier on that in some respects it's work in progress. So we're trying to get a bit more, for want of a better word, discipline in place so that we can get items in the forward plan, so it does cover a 6 month period. And I think the fact that we're bringing this to Scrutiny Committee will be a driver to make sure that happens. Yeah. So at the moment it might not necessarily cover the full 6 months, but our ultimate goal is to do that. Going back to your earlier point about pre-scrutiny and executive arrangements, it is more common for executive arrangements. But I think I brought this proposal forward because, as the chair has said, I think there is some merit in having some pre-scrutiny on a selection of items. Be very specific about which ones are going to be, where you think the committee can add value to the process. And even under a committee structure, the committees are very much, the recommendations are there for the committee to consider and vote upon those recommendations. And I think what I'm trying to put forward in 2.7 is that there is an opportunity for this committee to have input into those recommendations, so that the recommendations that go to the final decision maker have had some input from scrutiny, so their recommendations that a wider selection of members have been more involved in the process in developing them, and hopefully we're then in a situation where they're more acceptable for a wide range of members as well.
Okay. Laura, would you like to comment?
Thanks. It was just to say, should we perhaps note that there is, as far as the budgetary issues go, there is a separate budgetary review group, cross-party group, which will be doing some of this sort of scrutiny.
Indeed, and I thought that there were a number of criteria I thought we might be able to use in determining which if any of these pieces of work we would want to scrutinise, and one of those is there another group that will be looking at reviewing the report before it goes ahead, and certainly the finance ones will go to the finance working group, and therefore I was going to suggest excluding those from the list of items that we would consider. And there are various others like that. Also those where it's difficult for us to, because the statutory process is being followed more or less, it's difficult to make propose alternatives, and therefore there's little possibility for us to make any real substantive changes. And then of course we've got the issue of timing, and I think we will not have time. There will not be any time to consider the reports that are due in January. So my proposal would be that we start with the reports that from February onwards, and that would give us an opportunity perhaps to input into those. Now there is another issue, and that is we don't have a meeting until February, so I think that part of that proposal would be to pull forward the February meeting so that it happens very early on in February, and that will allow time between our meeting and the 26th of February, which I think is when the first reports would occur. Our current meeting is March, so bringing it forward from March to early February, if we wanted to discuss any of the reports in February or March. Andy?
I'm a little confused because often the reports aren't available until the day that the papers are published. So are we really going to put officers under pressure to produce the report early enough for us to scrutinise it and then make changes? So I mean, essentially we're talking about a month or two before the report's due to give us time to do the work you're talking about. And that, to me, that doesn't quite feel realistic.
Well, again, it's the issue is, what do we do? Do we just drop the I's and cross the T's, or do we ask for a statement of direction that the report is likely to take, and the issues that are being addressed, and the what factors that need to be taken into consideration? So we look at it in broad terms. We don't look at the detail of the outcome. We don't just dot the I's and cross the T's. We actually look at the direction of travel of the report and whether there are other factors that we need to take into consideration. Sue.
Yeah, I can see some of this, and like you said, we're scrutinising, somebody else is scrutinising. The one thing that, if it's trying to do the reports before they go to a full council meeting where the council has got to decide upon them, or a committee meeting, then maybe, as Mandy said earlier, we're trying to achieve what the council, so maybe cutting the amount of recommendations that are actually on the form, instead of there being about 10 recommendations, that we try to encourage the officer who's putting it together to put it with recommendations to achieve the goal that we're looking to aim at more, for the benefit of the council, not for the individuals, for what the council wants to achieve. So if we were, just for Dan saying we were going into a new waste contract, shall we say, we don't want, we're going to do recommendation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We want it concise so that it's for the benefit, and we know we're getting the best out of it for our council. And I think that's the one way I think we can scrutinise it better than having it, but shortening these recommendations and getting to something and making it the point that this is what we're trying to achieve, rather than we seem to be going round the houses a lot of times with, shall we say, with our last LGR issue. There was that much, that didn't benefit anything. It hasn't benefited this council whatsoever. So I think if that's something we're going to scrutinise, then maybe that is something that we would look at and put in proper, recommendations in to achieve what is for the goal of what that report's about.
Thank you.
That's-
Yes, I think that there's a lot of merit in that, and tying it to Andy's point about the terms of reviewing the terms of reference, or for the being involved very early on in the report writing process.
Might it be possible to sort of reduce the additional workload on officers by doing it in a more informal way? So, for example, just looking ahead at what we might want to look at, just as a possible example, the decision on the Ashbourne Airfield supplementary planning document, for example, rather than terms of reference or draft report, we could perhaps invite one of the officers involved to actually just come and talk to us about what the main issues are that the officers are encountering, and have a discussion about what members' concerns might be.
Indeed, that's how the MCA Overview and Scrutiny Committee works. So before, when a paper is coming out, or when they're starting to think about papers, they are coming to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and presenting their ideas at that stage, and that seems to work. Except at the moment, it is happening too late, and just before the meetings. But they still present the paper to the Scrutiny Committee in the way that you're suggesting. And if we could get that done a little bit earlier, then it would be, I think we'd be able to achieve what. Yeah.
Yeah, just picking up on Laura's point, actually taking that particular theme, which of course occurs twice, it comes to C&E and then it comes to full council. That's a very, very important document. This phase of Ashbourne Airfield is absolutely crucial to our housing supply. And they are actually briefing ward members, so they could, I suppose, brief a group of this committee if that was so desired, I suppose. That might be a way of moving this forward if it's helpful. But I think they are at the moment doing all that they can to put people in the picture ahead of those meetings, so full credit to them. But this is undoubtedly one of the key significant items in this forward plan of decisions.
Okay, any other comments? If in that case, I mean, the first part of this then is looking at Jason's report, and I do know that Jason is also, he's told us this evening that he's also working on a revision to the report writing process in general, which might might then allow us to consider including scrutiny within that process at an early stage. So if we can at this stage just park that, but with the idea perhaps of taking forward something along the lines that Laura, Sue and Andy are suggesting in terms of pre-scrutiny, and then turn to the list and whether do we want to include any of the projects, work items in this list. And I think moving on, not thinking of the January ones because that's too early, but if we could start with the February items. And really that starts with the car park review, the review of the land holdings. Then moving on from that, there are two in GNR, I think, so which I don't think we'll be able to. We would need to do because of the work group. And then we move into March, and again, excluding the GNR reports, we come to the Ashbourne Reborn update on the 11th of March, and weed management, and then there's the Ashbourne Airfield supplementary planning document. So are there any of those that anybody would feel it was important for us to scrutinise? Andy?
Much as I hate to say, I wonder if we should look at weeds, because that's always a contentious. Whether we should look at weeds, because that's always a contentious subject, and there are lots of different views, and we get evidence from the Clean and Green team about what they're doing and what the impact is. We get very little evidence on the surrounding actual impact of the chemicals we're using.
Is there any support for Andy's proposal? Yes, okay, thank you, and I would as well, for the reasons that stated. Right, okay, so that's one. Now, given that we have two others already in the pipeline for the next meeting, are there any others that we would wish to contribute to at this stage?
Sorry, Chair, when is our next meeting? Are we meeting before the 19th?
Well, I'm proposing that we bring the meeting forward. So it would happen in early February, so we have a chance to contribute to these projects. So, what we would do is invite the person responsible for the weed management report to come to a meeting in early February with us to outline the issues and proposals that they are considering for future weed control. With that, yeah, Roger.
Yes, I'm just thinking about this process in general. It is difficult, isn't it? Because we do meet so infrequently, and we already have a programme. And as you've identified, sort of 90% of these things are finance or legal documents anyway. So it's possibly quite hard to consider how we might carry out pre-decision scrutiny on them. It may be the case that we need to look even further ahead. So I'm aware that there are things that the council is doing in its sort of long-term forward plan that I hear very little about at all. I will give the example of, and somebody will tell me that that particular project has been stopped already and I haven't noticed, the solar farm that is spoken of. But if somebody asked me about the detail of that, I would have absolutely no idea, other than that I believe it is somewhere in the vicinity of Ashbourne. That's just an example of, quite a large project about which we know very little, but which is on the distant horizon. So it may be that further horizon spotting that's needed.
Okay, can we ask Jason to, at the next meeting, to bring forward the work programme for the whole of the year, for the whole of the civic year next time?
I can certainly try and obtain that information for you.
As much as is known about it.
But if members are keen to have a look at that issue of the solar farm, then I could put that on the list if that's that's something you want to. Just going back slightly on the conversation, I think the conversation that members have had about pre-scrutiny, my view of how it operates and how I've seen it operate elsewhere is very much as councillors were saying, that it's not so much considering formal reports, it's about having a dialogue with officers who are in the process of preparing reports so that we can get some recommendations and some content in there that members are happy with.
Okay. So we have two projects now. One is the weed management, and the other would be the solar farm. Laura.
So can I just comment on Andy's comment? I do agree the weed management is important and it is going to create a lot of debate, but I'm not sure what more we can add to the debate that C&E will have within a couple of weeks after we discuss it. So are we just potentially creating more work if we call it into our forum?
Andy.
I think for me, one of the problems is that I'm asked to make a decision without sufficient information in the paper to tell me whether it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. And I think if we were to meet with who's ever writing the report, I guess it's Sam, then we can try and get some of that information in, or get an expert in that can add some information. I mean, yeah, I don't want to go into the detail. It's that level of the information I get doesn't help me really make necessarily the right decision.
Roger.
Yeah, I only used that example of the solar farm as one that happened to be kicking around in my head. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of...
No, I think the solar farm, it would be.
Okay, well, it might be, but there's probably others as well. It might be a bit of Christmas homework for us to look at that long list of projects which we all have somewhere and try and spot those which we think are likely, I mean, you know, crystal ball gazing here, are likely to come forward, but are ones where members are likely to have an interest in a degree of the detail, but which we suspect officers are working on already, hopefully.
Okay.
And just about up, Chair, if members have got any suggestions, if they want them to feed them into me, I'll take that up with the officers across the council and we can move that forward.
Can I suggest that I think the point about the you're making a good point about the Ashbourne Airfield supplementary planning document. I suspect there will be a lot of interest from a lot of councillors in that, and it might be useful for a presentation to all councillors on that supplementary planning document, so that all councillors can be present, and that could be done independently of this committee. It would just be done as an informative to inform councillors. Okay, so are we getting to a point where we can move to a vote? So we need a recommendation. What is the recommendation already in this?
So I think the proposal I've written down is that we're going to look at the possibility of pre-decision scrutiny on the issue about weed management, and also on the issue about the solar farm. What I'd suggest is, because we were looking at bringing an earlier date in order to do that, so I suggest we leave it that I canvass members and look for a date in February where the relevant officers can make it, as well as members of this committee, and then we'll confirm a date later.
Yeah.
So that's the proposal I've written down.
Thank you. Andy?
I suspect we should leave the solar array until
Yeah.
the new director's appointed, because the Climate Change and Biodiversity Group haven't met for quite some time, and this is important, but they should have first look at it and set the direction. I don't think we should be going in and second guessing them, which is what we'll be doing at this stage.
Okay, there is some public comment about the fact that we aren't progressing it, and there are one or two other areas in terms of solar panels that aren't being progressed as well, in terms of solar panels on car parks. So I think there's a general interest amongst the public in what we're doing with solar panels. I don't know if we need to reflect that.
I think if you were to broaden it out to what we're doing with solar panels rather than focusing on the solar farm. Broaden it out to solar panels generally and what's happening across the spectrum, that would be a much better thing for us to look at as a group.
Okay. Would that find favour in the group? Yeah. Okay. So if we take Jason's proposal, would anybody like to move it? So we're looking at doing pre-scrutiny on the weed management plan and on our endeavours in introducing solar panels, and bringing forward our next meeting to early February, in line with when officers are able to make it. So you'd like to move it, Andy? Okay. Anybody would like to second it? And Tony seconded it. So all those in favour? Against? No, that's unanimous then. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. So we move on to item 7 now, which is the consultation task and finish group. So there's a lot of information here. So, but the recommendation is straightforward. In terms of the recommendation, Jason, are you proposing that we inform anybody of this our recommendations?
So basically, I've put a covering report on the front of this, but it is essentially the report of the Task and Finish group that's attached to Appendix 1. What I've tried to do for clarity is just tease out the recommendations that are in that report. So I think I rely on Councillor Dobbs to confirm whether that's correct or not, but I think the main recommendations are set out in paragraph 2.2 of my covering report. The next step would be is that if the committee accept the recommendations of the Task and Finish group, it would then go forward as a recommendation to the relevant decision-making body, which in this case would be Governance and Resources Committee. I think it would be presented to the committee again with a covering report, just to provide some further detail on what some of the issues about implementing these recommendations would be. So in terms of if there were any significant resource implications and what they might be. But essentially the recommendations of this committee would go forward to the decision-making body.
Okay. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to just explain what the Task and Finish group did and take you through? I'm happy to answer any questions. Sorry about the bulk of the material, but I thought it was important to see what the consultations looked like, where that was possible. So I only joined Scrutiny post-AGM, so I agreed in June to lead this Task and Finish group and basically pick up the baton from another group, Task and Finish group, that was tasked with the same thing, and just try to bring it to a conclusion, and that's hopefully where we are today. So having asked for members to join, I was joined by Councillor Bond and Nigel, Councillor Walker, Evans Walker, and we essentially liaised by email for this. We didn't actually meet and discuss, we exchanged emails. And the first thing that I did was actually to meet with Claire Allen, and from that I generated a sort of overview of what normally happens and her input into that. And you can kind of see the things that I reported back on that from, I think it's from page 34 onwards, where I set the background and then what I did. So interview with the corporate policy officer, and then I summarise that, and that's at the front end of this report. It reflects current practice. And then I attempted to look at 3 different consultations. They were in the order that I looked at them: the Air Quality Action Plan for Ashbourne, and then the Travellers Review, and then finally Public Space Protection Order. And that one was added because it's a very different kind of consultation. For each of those, what I did was as follows. I looked at the evidence myself. I then put my first thoughts on paper to the officer that I thought was most directly responsible. So in the case of the AQAP, that was Karen Carpenter, and she basically said whether or not she thought that was a fair reflection, and then her own reflections, her own comments, and then I modified the report that I wrote in the light of those that piece of information. Same thing for Travellers. Slight problem, of course, there was no officer then who was actually involved in that initial process, who is currently available, but Caroline very kindly replied on behalf of the department. And then finally, the PSPO one, I sent it to Vicky and she commented, and then I modified it in the light of that. Now, during this process, there was toing and froing, so I'm very grateful to Councillor Bond, Jeff Bond, who essentially wrote the part at the front end. So pages 31 to 33 is his summary of having read my reports and the comments for those officers that I've mentioned. And then, of course, Jason's kind of distilled that down again, and you've got these 3 recommendations that you see at 2.2, which I believe should go to GNR. So hopefully that makes some sense and gives you a feel for what was done. It was tried to be as efficient as possible without taking up officer time, because you can actually, drain an awful lot of resource by making people answer questions there and then opposite you. But in one sense, that is necessary, but I tried to avoid it where it was possible to do so. Perfectly happy to answer any questions about my methodology, but I think that's about it, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, comments? Councillor Nash, Andy.
Question rather than comment, and forgive me, Peter, if I've missed this in the paper somewhere. What's a light evaluation step? Sorry? What's a light evaluation step?
I think, I think that what was foreseen was that those involved would have a quick chat with Claire about what was done and whether or not it achieved the objectives and how it could be improved. I mean, nothing onerous, but just to touch base. I mean, she did make the point in the interview that on some occasions consultations had to take place because of decisions that were made in committee, but she didn't necessarily know exactly what was going on. And she did feel that, there was, although she doesn't have very much time that she can devote to this, there was some input that she could have made that might have made it easier. I certainly know that Karen Carpenter found the AQAP enormously demanding, and the analysis, which was entirely done in-house, was a huge task. Not as big as the PSPO one, which is even greater, I imagine, in terms of officer time. But we need to watch what we, or indeed you need to plan when you write the consultation, exactly how you're going to process it to do it in the most efficient and most effective way. And I think maybe that's what we're missing, and this is the kind of mechanism that maybe could generate that structure. Does that help?
I think so. I'm not quite sure where in the process you see this happening. The light evaluation step.
When it's finished, but of course we've also writing in that we want something. We want Claire to be involved in the beginning, comms to be involved in the beginning, not so. Here you are. This falls in environmental health, so it's your job to write this thing and then set it out there and find all the venues to have the meetings or something. And that's what they were saying was difficult. So if we put some structure in place, if you've ever tried to write a consultation, you know how difficult it is, and invariably people misinterpret it. But there is expertise, and if we can actually share that, despite the fact there's not a huge amount of manpower around, then that might be a good way to make the things more effective going forward.
Laura.
Thanks. I've been going back through the report because I know in here somewhere there is a reference to one of the purposes of consultation being to convince the public that their opinions are being taken into account in the decision-making process, and we need to show that the decision has been influenced by the responses to the consultation, so that there's been some point to it. But that doesn't seem to have fed through into an express recommendation. Is that sort of inherent in the light touch evaluation? Or could we perhaps have something a bit more concrete about we should really try to demonstrate that public opinion has influenced the eventual outcome?
Yeah, this of course is one of the central principles of consultation, that it should have an impact. The problem is, for example, in the Air Quality Action Plan that I have, I think, mentioned in my comments, is that a lot of these things which were put forward as part of the plan were beyond our control. They're a county council responsibility, an operational decision which only they can make. So, in a sense, there is only so much impact the consultation can possibly have because of the limitations of ownership, responsibility and so on. But absolutely, if we can try to emphasise where it made a difference, that would help. But I'm not quite sure how you formalise that.
I think perhaps there should be a requirement, or a bullet point for for public feedback to explain that, if that's the case, if there are limits like that. Obviously they would be explained in the preamble to the consultation, but then perhaps again afterwards it should be recorded that the responses have produced this result in the eventual decision making, but if there isn't a traceable outcome, then to explain why, for example, that things are outside our control, or the public wanted something we weren't legally allowed to give them, or
Yes, the latter definitely for the air quality action plan, where we said, can we have a bypass, please? Which of course was not to the point of the consultation, but understandable anxiety for Ashbourne residents. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to have that if somebody wants to suggest an additional recommendation. But again, don't let's make it too onerous, because you know we a council with a finite lifetime. Other councils may have different structures which we may be able to borrow later on. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Roger, would you like to come in now?
Thank you. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking that I would be an ardent champion of lots of consultation, but I'm actually quite nervous about consultation, having seen not just the examples that Councillor Dobbs and Councillor Bond and Edwards Walker have put forward into this, but I remember being quite horrified by some of the wording in the consultation that took place on I think the housing strategy for the local plan in the summer of 2024. And it led me to the conclusion really that there are certain cases where consultation isn't appropriate because it's not actually going to alter anything. If anything, what it will do is it has the danger to wear out, to tire the public so that they become consultation fatigued. And they also become quite cynical, ultimately, if they feel that they're being consulted on for consultation's sake, rather than necessarily having the actual influence over some of the things they would like to. Now, I accept there are some things they won't have influence over, like the Ashbourne bypass, for example. So perhaps I would suggest a few other things that could go into this. And one of them would be to ensure that if you are doing a consultation that's put forward to the public, that there is a short paragraph which explains what's outside the scope of the consultation. Because there will be people who read into a consultation on all sorts of things. The Gypsy and Traveller site would be the other example, where they think they have got the ability to stop things in their tracks. That leads me on to my second point. So the outside scope is important. I think the second point would be to ensure that people do actually understand what the questions are before they get as far as being printed. And the council has a panel, does it not, for consultation, members of the public. And I do wonder whether at some point in this process, before it gets to the printed stage, that one step is taken back, or an extra couple of weeks are built into the process at the front end to ensure that there is a requirement to sense check the effect of the actual wording on people. I leap to the final page 81 of the document here, where there's that reference to the Plain English campaign and the crystal mark, which I think is something I raised. I am phenomenally concerned at the language which is involved in a lot of council reports, particularly the ones that relate to planning issues, and the ability for people like myself actually to misunderstand it. And I think if I misunderstand things, then heaven help the people out there who are exposed to this on a very, very irregular basis. So I would recommend having that other pair of eyes, if possible, as well, the non-technical pair of eyes, as part of the sense checking of the questions. I think that's it at this stage.
Peter?
Yeah, just to come back, hopefully that would be covered by point one. So with Claire Allen involved and indeed comms involved. Now comms should be good at this, getting the message over in an accessible way. But yes, absolutely. And we have done sort of shot and foot, because I think the timescale, if I think back to the air quality action plan, it was almost certainly put together in a great hurry, and it was the typical thing. Statement about process, do you strongly agree, blah, 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 5-point scale, you score it. That's the easy way to do it. but on the other hand, are you going to get the information that you actually want out of it? And I quite agree, right at the beginning, to define the scope of what's possible, the extent. And I think that is, you know, hardwired into the gunning principles. You know, you actually, if you're consulting, it's got to be on something that people can actually make a difference about. And if you can't make any difference, then perhaps you're not to be consulting about that aspect, because it gives them the wrong impression.
Okay, thank you. I had a detailed thought about the travellers' consultation, and particularly the public meetings element of it, which perhaps isn't really captured in the report. But I believe that that consultation fell down on the accuracy of the information that was made available, and so that goes against gunning principle number 2. And I feel that it was a major failing of that consultation, because it meant that people didn't take it, well, they questioned the whole consultation because they knew that the information, they could see from their own eyes that the information was wrong. And I was surprised that had got through to the point where it appeared in the report, where it was such an obvious failing that there were actual factual mistakes in the information that went out, in the report that went out. So that is another, I think that's another issue that we need to address. So scoping correctly, and ensuring that we aren't consulting on things that we can't change. Accuracy of information, plain English, I think are three very clear outcomes of this process. Right outcomes that we should need to, of the scrutiny that we need to put forward to Claire and to others. I thought the idea of putting it to putting a consultation to the panel was a good one, to make sure that to give a good sense check. Whether that's always practical, I don't know. But the other point. Okay, right, yeah. But the other point that was raised was the amount of time taken to analyse the results of consultations, and that's going to be a big problem when it comes to the local plan consultation, and is exercising people at the moment. And I'd like to make an additional recommendation here that we trial artificial intelligence for reviewing the consultation responses. Now that adds another level of rigour necessary in the questions, so that the artificial intelligence tool can actually interpret the responses reasonably accurately. Now, probably what we need to do is run it side by side with a manual assessment of the responses to determine whether or not artificial intelligence was at this stage able to accurately reflect our residents. Roger.
Yes, Chair. It could do a first sift, I think. So that's the way I tend to use it. I confess, for work. So you have to sense check what it's providing you with, and you'll find out quite quickly, I think, whether or not it's taking things down a path in terms of the evidence that you weren't expecting.
Government has got a tool called Consult, which I'm not sure it's available to to local authorities, but they're using it centrally. My suggestion would be that we include a recommendation to consider using a tool such as Consult. Andy?
I welcome the idea to use more AI within the council. I do wonder whether the local plan, given the resource challenges we already have and the very tight timescales, whether trying it there as a first instance is a good idea.
No, I wasn't thinking of that, Andy. I was thinking of one of the other consultations that we might do in the interim. Yeah, but get something smaller. Yeah. Can I add that to the list of recommendations? Yeah. Okay. So would anybody else like to discuss the findings? Any other points to be made? In that case, can I ask somebody to move those recommendations?
Chair, just to add there, I think some of the points that have been made about scoping, accuracy of information, plain English, sense checking, I think that could be incorporated into the wording on the first bullet point about involving the corporate policy officer in communications, because it specifically says clarity and timing, but I think we could add all those other elements there as well to that first recommendation, just to capture the discussion here.
Yeah, I think that was, yes, I think that was what was intended. Laura?
Is it worth including a fourth bullet point of some sort of feedback, public feedback on how the information has...
Yes, yes. So when you say public feedback, you mean feed a report back to the public, or do you mean...
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean like a huge report, but maybe just, you know, a paragraph on the website. So if anybody wanted to see what the outcome of the consultation had been, then there's something there that they can read that says, briefly, what decision was made and how it was affected by the...
Okay, rather than just
responses.
the report of the consultation.
Yeah, something that's easily accessible, I think, to people, so that people who've gone into the website to put their input in can go back to the same place and see what happened.
Right, okay, thank you.
Absolutely, that was the third bullet point, because I actually found trying to trace any of these in the early stage, I couldn't find them. I had to ask specifically, departmentally, for them. I mean, they exist, but they're not readily accessible. And what you've said to be included, so you've got what the consultation was, what the result was, and indeed, you know, what influence it had on the decision making would be an excellent thing to have as an archive. Yeah, thank you.
The economic regulators like Ofcom and Ofwat and so on have a format for this, and they have a web page for each consultation, and they will include the terms of reference to the consultation itself, a report on that, and then the decisions made as a result of the consultation. I mean, most of the times the consultations are on proposed decisions or on information about a market sector, and they will produce a comprehensive report based on the findings and the decision that follows from that report. I think something like that is what I would consider necessary, really. Okay, so we have 5 recommendations now then, because we need feedback and the idea of trialling with a relatively small consultation, the use of AI. Peter?
Sorry, Chair, I thought Jason suggested incorporating into the first bullet point.
Yeah, okay, but the feedback is a fourth one.
Well, yes, and that's in the third bullet point.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think we could incorporate that into the wording of the third one,
flesh
just
them out a bit,
so it would be a central register of consultation, shared templates, and outcomes.
Yeah, okay. Right, so okay, so we'd have 4 recommendations.
Yes.
Then. Okay then. Would anybody like to move those 4 recommendations? Peter? Seconder? Roger. Okay, all those in favour? Good, so that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, I think we're nearly there. That's it. Good. Well, thank you very much for attending, and we finished 1 minute to 7, so just 1 hour. That's good.